Hey, Samantha. All right, let me drop in, let everyone know that I'm live, and then I've also got to post the link. So 1 second. Okay. All right, for those dropping in, just bear with me. I am here. I'm just posting the link on Instagram really quickly. So for those of you that are in the chat, if someone happens to drop in and is like, what's going on? Right? Would you mind letting them know, Samantha, that I am here? I'm just posting the link elsewhere. So I am here. Okay. All right. Wonderful. All right. Good. Hey, Aurora. Good. Samantha still here. Okay. All right. Sama, welcome. Thank you guys for your patience on allowing me to be able to show up here. I really appreciate it. I'm honestly really grateful because there were times like just a few months ago where I would wake up with a migraine or I would wake up and I would be dizzy, nauseous, which is still there a little bit, but it's not, I'm not remaining stuck in that like I used to. So, even though I woke up feeling not 100%, I'm still able to show up, and I'm feeling better and better now that I'm up moving around. And that's actually a big shift for me. Especially, if you've been around me for some time, you guys know I used to be plagued with migraines a lot. Thank you, Samantha. Because this is the time frame around my monthly cycle, and my monthly cycle has always been a challenge, but not because of the monthly cycle. Our hormones just enhance and intensify what's already there. So, if you've worked with me privately, this is something that I've gone over with you guys, right? Is the reminder that it's not our period, it's not our monthly cycle. Like, we don't just feel bad because of our monthly cycle. We're in a state of behaviors, or our body is acting from a state that's unwell, and the hormones, that time of the month, the cycle just enhances it and intensifies it. So that's why it feels pretty rough. All right. Let's see if there's anyone else here from my community. Mina, Kirsten, Victoria, are any of you guys here? Can you let me know in the chat? Or just drop it into WhatsApp and let me know, because that way I'll go ahead and get started if you guys are here. I am going to do some community moderation here, so just hang on. It's just going to limit those that are able to comment. Well, I'll give it a moment and see who drops in. Okay. All right. Thank you all for being here. For everyone that is here, if you can just give me one more second, I'm going to drop into my self-development, self-mastery community, and just let them know, just to reiterate that I'm live. If you can just give me, oh, okay, there's Mina, Kirsten. Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you. Okay, beautiful. That's everyone. Okay, wonderful. Welcome, YouTube Chase. I'm grateful you guys are here. Yeah, so thank you. And Kristen, I'm grateful that you're choosing to tune in here before your call. I really appreciate that. And thank you guys again for your patience on allowing me to show up here, and allowing me to just move through what my body was experiencing. Welcome to everyone that's dropping in. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Éoaccí, and the topic of today that I want to discuss with everyone is something that's obviously something I'm experiencing in my own life. It's a personal application that I'm moving through. It's a personal application that I'm guiding others through. And before I get into that, for anyone that's in the chat, if you're just gonna like start dropping in BS, just to let you know, I'm just gonna block you anyways. So you can go ahead and do that if you want. If you feel like you need to just absolutely get some sort of attention-seeking behavior out, go ahead. But I'll just close the chat off. So, or I'll just block you. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it open for a few more minutes, but if that does continue, then I will go in and I will do some community moderation. This topic, this subject matter is around emotional wealth and healthy boundaries. And one thing that I just said right there is a healthy boundary. It's not a disrespect. It's a recognition that me being here, me showing up right now, me choosing to be present and share this with you is me choosing to take something that I have consistently applied through responsible action and to share that freely and openly, right? It doesn't cost you anything. It just costs you your time and attention. You don't have to pay for it. I'm not asking anything out of you. All I'm asking is a little bit of awareness. Not a little bit. I'm asking for all of the attention and awareness, not because it's attention for me, it's attention for you. I want you to be here with your attention and your awareness. And I invite you to pay attention to what happens when you are attentive, when you pay attention to what's being said, instead of just wanting to be seen as someone that can get attention. So the healthy boundaries are something that I didn't grow up with. And because I did not grow up with it, I did not know how to act from it. I did not know how to implement it. And so one of the things that I've been able to really, really learn over the course of the last month from my own mentors and just consistently choosing to receive for myself is how to implement boundaries, how to implement rules, how to implement a state of emotional wealth, physical wealth, and monetary wealth. Monetary wealth only began to follow me when I was implementing healthy boundaries through a stable course of action for myself, right? Because I have behaviors, I have beliefs, I have emotional suppression that I have been that I was consistently and unconsciously acting from. And the title of today, Living Life Untethered, it can sound almost like you're floating away from responsibility, but it's actually the exact opposite. Living life untethered for me means living without attachment. So if I'm living without attachment, I'm not dependent upon some form of emotional experience. I'm not chasing an emotional experience. Hello and welcome, Kelly. I'm not chasing the need to feel a certain way, and I'm not chasing the need for someone else to show up and support me in a certain way so that I can feel a certain way. And this is something that was deeply embedded in my childhood, was these consistent perceptions and perceived courses of action that were coming from this perception, this scenario of what my parents did or did not do. So, for instance, let's say that there was a conversation that took place between me and my mom. And my mom said something that I perceive to be, one second, let me set up this community moderation really quickly. That way, again, just taking out the trash. So let's say that I was perceiving that something that my mom said in that moment, from that point in childhood, which, by the way, you guys, what I'm saying here, unless you're consistently aware of your own memories and how you have chosen to perceive every moment of your childhood, pretty much, you're acting out your childhood right now. Just because you're 21, just because you're 32, just because you're 44, doesn't mean you're an adult. It means that you're identifying with a number. It doesn't mean that your behaviors are acting from an advanced state of evolution. That's growing up. When you grow up, you're responsible for yourself. You do not consistently blame your responsibilities on other people. It's not your parents' responsibility for how you feel. It's not your parents' responsibility for how you act, but your nervous system doesn't know that. So your nervous system is still carrying around the memories, the perceptions, the beliefs, the behaviors, just like what I was speaking into here, this moment that took place between myself and my mom, and having a conversation with my mom, and she says something and I perceive what she's saying as her not listening to me or her being emotionally unavailable. So then I'm perceiving her words as being somehow harsh or maybe hurting my feelings. Of course, we all identify with those words in a certain way. And so in that moment, there's an imprint. My nervous system remembers that moment because I chose in that moment to remember that specifically in that way, because I am operating from a place of fight or flight. My body is consistently trying to protect me from experiencing that again, because to me, it was emotionally impactful. And an emotionally impactful moment means that I, in that moment, resented her, or I began to perceive through resentment. I began to perceive through anger. I began to perceive through frustration. My need in that moment, whatever it was I needed from her, I needed her to hear me. I needed her to listen to me. I needed her to pay attention to me. And in that moment, because of the way that I chose to perceive her response, my nervous system is saying, okay, so this is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like when we're not heard. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like when no one is paying attention to us. This is what it looks like, and this is what it sounds like when someone is not emotionally supportive of me. So therefore, my own emotional integrity drops. So from that point, my own wealth of emotions is starting to deteriorate. I'm starting to go in the negative. And we began to build our own reality around the relationship with our parents. That's our very first relationship. And as we're experiencing, even like what's happening in the world right now, I just made a post on Instagram about this. Many people, I see many people that quote unquote do the work, that get caught up in world or political views, world or political happenings, and they post their own perception around that. So there's an emotional pendulum that's connected to world events, even to like sporting events. And so if I take a side, I see, obviously we see this around everywhere right now, Israel versus Palestine, right? Israel versus Islam, or however you want to label any of that. When you choose a side, you choose a side of emotional dependency. There's this perception that those people need to be protected and saved, and because something bad is happening to them. So we believe if we step in and we have a belief around it, if we feel like our opinion, our belief is going to somehow help to save and support them, then we're completely bypassing the original, the core wound, or the core perception and the original belief system, which is that I inherently believe, or I have chosen to believe, that I am unworthy and I am unsafe. Because I see that these people are being judged, they're being persecuted. I need to protect them because they're being treated as if they're not worthy of love and they're not worthy of something. And so I identify with what's happening in the world, and I take on that identity stance, and therefore I invest myself emotionally, mentally, which is physically, and I become attached, or I was already in a state of attachment, and I just connect that deeper in that moment. So there are no boundaries in that state. There's no emotional wealth in that state. There's only self-depreciation. And in self-depreciation, what happens is over time, when we're not aware of our emotional state, our emotional integrity begins to decline. So we become very susceptible to things like savior complex, victim mentality. We take on that stance. And what happens is it's basically like we have these ropes that are connected to our nervous system, and we're basically it feels like we're being led or drug around, yanked around, led by these ropes. And those ropes are anchored in like the need for approval, guilt, old emotional contracts, like the ones from childhood where I felt like my voice wasn't heard. So therefore now I need to use my voice to stand up and protect others, because that's the only way I feel like I can be validated, is if I openly speak and allow my voice to be heard. And where I'm speaking from and the things that I'm speaking into, a lot of people aren't going to understand this. They're not going to even understand the intention and the purpose of what I'm saying. But if you pay attention, you'll understand that the past is living through you. And the past is always open for change. But you first have to understand what that is. What is your past? How is it living through you? And if you're running around and you're just using your voice to talk about things, then you don't have an awareness of what you're talking about. And therefore, then you just start sputtering and spouting off things, and you have no awareness of what you're even speaking about. And when we do this, we're basically, it's like being behind the wheel of a car drunk. We think we're in control, but we're not. We're not in control. What's controlling us are those old contracts, the need for approval. Hey, look at me, pay attention to me. The need to be validated. And so we go on social media and we take a stance. We lean into one side of the war machine or the other. We lean into one side of the political fight or the other. And we think that our opinion, our side, our beliefs, how we feel is the only point of validation. It's all about me. It's not about we. And I know many think that when we step in to try to act as a savior on behalf of another person, that we're acting from a place of we, but we're not. It's really about me in that moment. It's about what I think this person needs. It's about how I think this group of people needs me to support them. And the interesting twist on all of this is everyone's seeking freedom and everyone's seeking peace, but what you're craving when it comes to freedom and peace, it's never found in your external circumstances. It's all about emotional liquidity. How willing are you to exist right now with the way everything is and just be unconditionally accepting of it? And if you can simply hold yourself accountable and you can act through unconditional acceptance, which means that you're not acting on a trigger, you're not acting on the tether of your old emotional relationship with your parents, you're acting from an awareness that it exists, but you're not acting from the belief that it's the only thing that exists. Because that's what happens when we're still entangled in those very first perceptions of our relationship with our parents. We're still carrying around those beliefs that they didn't meet our needs, that they did or did not do something for us, that maybe they did make us feel a certain way. And because they did make us feel a certain way, they did not actually show up in support of us. The did or did not creates a very interesting dialogue within your own voice. Because when you speak, that's what you speak from. And it becomes very polarized in terms of it's very biased. There's a very biased speak that comes through. And one thing I want to invite you guys to dial into here is this emotional liquidity. And one second. Sorry, Elliot. I just did a refresh on the comments. I'm just now seeing your stuff. So if you'll just bear with me. So yes, I do still have my parents. And I would invite, as things are being dropped into the chat, to maybe just be with what's being said and see how you can apply it to what's happening in the present moment of your own experience in your own reality. It's not just about the past, and it's not just about looking. How can you look to a future if you don't even know what's happening right now? It's so easy to say things like that. It's so easy to bypass an actual attentive awareness by saying, oh, it doesn't matter about your past. Move on. Look to your future. Just be happy. Those types of words make it seem so simple, but underneath it's literally embedded in states of consistent bypassing, like bypassing what your truth really is, bypassing what's really happening within you, and trying so hard to distract yourself by saying things like that. Or actually, those words are coming from a state of distraction. But if we pay attention, if we look at, let's just look at our own emotional liquidity, right? So let's look at that as emotional wealth. Many people look to financial wealth or even physical health as wealth. All of that begins with what's being held in your nervous system, what is being, like how you're accessing yourself somatically. And all of that comes back to your emotional liquidity, because your body cannot act in a state of balance and harmony, and you cannot attract true abundance without having an awareness of how you're actually acting, how you're actually behaving, how you're actually feeling, and where that's coming from in your nervous system. And if you choose to accept that, then we can also accept money isn't something that just flows through your hands. Money is how stable your internal reserves are when life fluctuates. That's real wealth. Wealth isn't about how much money I have or how much money flows through me. It's how stable am I when things get crazy? Can I simply sit and be with what's happening, observe it, and not react to it or go into a reaction because of it? And when I'm acting through a reaction, I'm unconsciously acting. I'm not aware of my behaviors. I'm not aware of my actions. Just like doom scrolling or being on your phone all the time, it's really, really easy to be in this belief system that, oh, I'm on my phone, I'm accomplishing something. I do this. All of my work is on the phone. It's online, right? My sessions, my lives. And a lot of times I'll get on my phone and I'll get busy and I'll be creating flyers, or, I'll post something, I'll do a social media post, but then I'll be actively accomplishing something, if you will, but then that will lead into just mindlessly scrolling. It's so easy to bypass presence because we're so used to disassociating with how we feel. And we disassociate with how we feel because, again, going back to childhood, everyone has at least one impactful emotional event that is controlling how they show up. So the worst thing that you could ever do is go through life acting as if your past doesn't matter, because your past doesn't go anywhere. It's with you every moment of every day, and you're acting from it. It doesn't just disappear. And if you give yourself permission to just simply accept that and be with that, then you get to be consistently exploring yourself past, present, and future simultaneously without the stress of what's going to happen in the future and without the resentment of what happened in the past. So if in presence, being present is a skill for sure. Absolutely, Kirsten. And thank you, Mina. So I want to take what you ladies are saying here, and I thank you so much for your feedback. Being present is a skill, and it really is. So, and I'll get to that in just a second, Elliot. That's a really good question. And Elliot's asking one question: how to deal with regret of past things that have, I guess, taken place over a long period or that took place a long time ago. First, let's look at presence or being present as a skill. We hear this all the time. Just be present, meditate, right? Be with yourself, be with your body. But what does that mean? If you're not practicing, just like any skill, if you were gonna be a mechanic, you couldn't just read a book on how to apply mechanics. You would need to go out and actually hands-on practice the skill of being a mechanic. Heart doctor, they don't just read the medical books and then go, they do eventually perform surgery, but they have to perform acts on cadavers. There's a reason that they go through the process of consistently practicing, and then they graduate to, real-time people that require assistance that are alive. But we practice and practice and practice so that we can train our body on how to respond to what's happening. Because underneath what we're physically doing, there's a lot of other things that are happening. So being present is the act of observing. When I'm present, I am attentive and I am aware, but I am not reactive. Because our nervous system has harbored reactive behaviors for so long, many people think reactiveness is like acting out in anger. That's not the only reactive action that exists. Everyone has a response mechanism. Like when somebody's talking to you and they ask you something, everyone has some form of reactivity to a question, but you may not even realize it. A lot of people have fear around being asked a question. Many people are afraid they're not going to answer correctly. They don't like being called up in front of people because there is a fear of being seen, for fear of repercussion. And therefore, there's a fear of judgment. And all of this is living in the body, in the nervous system, all during the act of a question being posed. And almost no one has an awareness of this until you do. Right? And there's so many nuances to that simple act of being asked a question. I see this with those that I mentor, right? You guys have been with me for a while, and this is actually something that I specifically addressed was the different it was like a little mini chart, I guess, as to different ways that people respond to being asked a question. And a lot of times, well, I would say no, every time what's happening is our nervous system is bypassing truth. And because it's bypassing truth, it's answering from habitual reactivity. So even though we may think we're present because we're answering, we're not. Because the question that was asked activated something in us from the past, and our response is actually coming from active, reactive behaviors that are afraid to be seen. So even just that simple response can be a reactive answer that's encoded with those emotional, mental beliefs that have been there since childhood. And we may think that we're thinking clearly. We may think that we're actually responding with clarity because we know the answer. Many, again, self-development, self-help, I see this all the time because I've acted from it. I used to think because I knew things, because I had done the work, quote unquote, that I could answer responsibly until I realized I had no clue what that actually meant. And when I started accepting that, I had no clue what I was like, I had to really die to this part of me that thinks it knows everything, because when I would speak, that part of me would lead the conversation. It would lead the response. And the biggest gift we give ourselves is to become an empty vessel and recognize that our all-knowing self does not need to be seen as knowing everything. Like right now, what I'm sharing, it's not because I don't know everything. I don't even know close to everything. But what I'm speaking about right here is something that I have learned through consistent application. So I'm just sharing this one little snippet of something that I've learned through consistently applying different behaviors and different states of awareness. So presence and being present is an act of being with our awareness without reactivity, but acknowledging the reactivity and where it's coming from. So if I'm going to offer a responsible answer to a question, I'm not going to react immediately with an answer. I'm going to sit, I'm going to pay attention to the question. I'm going to actually listen to what's being asked of me, not just assuming that I have to have an answer because that's all that is asked. That's not all that's asked in a question. There's so much more in a question than just an answer. A responsible response is actively aware of why it's responding and with what. There, I'm in this emotional liquidity. I'm in a wealth of emotional awareness, and I'm in a wealth of regulation. That's a nervous system that feels really secure. It's not afraid of being seen. It's not afraid of what's going to come back if I answer a certain way. It's not afraid of repercussion. It's not afraid of what's coming back. So that takes practice. And because it takes practice, that's where willingness comes in, to be in devotion to showing up every single day and committed to your attentiveness. Like, people come on this channel all the time and they drop in comments like Paul there, just attempting to distract, attempting to get attention, thinking that what they have to say is so cute. But what's on the other side of that is I can just make it to where that energy does not come through here anymore. That's a boundary. I used to be afraid to implement those boundaries. I used to let anything and everything come through here because I was worried, what are people going to think of me? I'm not going to be able to reach enough people. I'm not going to be able to communicate with the people that I'm meant to communicate with. But Paul, I don't think anything negative of you. I just feel like you're seeking attention. And there's an opportunity, instead of seeking attention, be attentive and give yourself permission to just, I don't know, try something different for once, like just being present and receiving here. You chose to be here. You don't have to. If this isn't aligned for you, then check out. Don't be here. It's that easy. I don't lose anything. You don't lose anything. So if we begin to operate in that way, then it's not about, it's coming from a different state of the we. It's coming from a state of deeper awareness of not just what we think we want, but an awareness of what we need. And because we have grown up from the perception that our needs are never being met, we're trying so desperately to have people pay attention to us. We're trying so desperately to have people connect to us, when the truth was that we never have gone without connection. We've never gone without people. It's just, what kind of people, what kind of connection? And, one of the questions you asked, Elliot, was, how do we deal with regret? So I feel like that's a really good question and a really powerful shift that I would like to offer here. Regret, much like resentment, is a choice. To deal with resentment, to deal with regret, first and foremost, we have to accept that it exists. And I cannot tell you how many times through my own experience, through my own path, and through working with others, people try so hard to be seen as someone that does not have those feelings. I do have clients that fight being seen as someone that feels anger. They don't want to be seen as someone that gets angry, because that means they're a bad person. They don't want to be seen as someone that actually has judgments, because that would make them a bad person. They don't want to be seen as someone that feels guilt or has regret or shame, because that would make them a bad person. First and foremost, there is an opportunity here, an invitation to let go of that way of framing yourself and others. The law of polarity exists, okay? There's a light and a dark. There always has been, there always will be. There's a positive and a negative. There always has been, there always will be. But there is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. There is no such thing as that. It's a creation of fear. So when we regret something, we're afraid we didn't make a good choice. We're afraid there's fear is that underlining driving force. If I regret something, then I'm looking at that moment through a lens of, I didn't do something right. I could have done better, which means I'm placing judgment on myself. Shame is there. So I let go of it by choosing not to frame my perception in that way. How I choose to operate is I look and observe it, everything that's taken place in my life, every memory that comes up, every traumatic event, quote unquote, that traumatic event was only traumatic because of the way I chose to feel. It's affecting me traumatically because I'm holding on to a story, a way of feeling, a way of seeing, a way of believing that is negatively impacting me in my life. So if I want to let go of that, I have to shift out of the negative into the positive. But first, I have to just simply be willing to accept that that choice happened and that's okay. Like that event happened and that's okay because there's nothing wrong with what happened. It's not bad. And it also too, remember what's happening right now, whatever's happening in your reality, like even on a grand scale, like wars and all of these things, it's an outdated, it's already like that's the past being brought to light. It's playing out in front of you, so you have an awareness of your options, of where you get to go, not necessarily where you always are. Now, obviously, if it's consistently showing up, like if you have you have relationships, you have friendships that are always interacting from arguments, turmoil, if you're consistently looking at that other person and you're seeing what's wrong, you need to take that finger and turn it inwards, because there's no bad relationship, there's no bad friendship, there's no bad choice. There's just simply a learning opportunity. And the key is to understand what that's there to teach you. Because a lot of times people will hold on to situations, people, memories, because they're trying so hard to fix it. Or they believe they have to fix it, or they believe there's something they're not getting out of it. They feel like they've missed something. And that's also an illusion. So the key to this is to be able to recognize what's living through me, to be able to look on any memory, any event, any situation, no matter what it is, and to not project an opinionated stance or a judgment, or to consistently see it in the same way I always have. So with my mom, the relationship with my mom was always rocky. As I've mentioned many times, I've always seen her through a lens of like frustration and resentment and anger. And it was so easy to blame her for things. So easy, because that's all I've done my entire life. Since birth, there has been blame. Because the story that was passed down, the story I was carrying, was that she didn't really want me. And because I felt like she didn't want me, I didn't want her. So that type of anger and aggression and resentment, I didn't want her. I didn't care about her, but it was always about her. I would say that. I was like, I don't care what she says. I don't care what she does. It's not, it doesn't affect me. But in truth, it was always affecting me. It was always affecting me because I was living from the effect, as we say. Like that's something I learned in like my coaching, classes and courses. It's called like in neurotransformation therapy. It's called living from the effect. And when I'm living from the effect, I'm always living from a reactive state, even if I believe I'm not. So living from regret means looking back on my choices and living from a reactive state of not good enough, feeling unworthy, because there is some moment in childhood where you adopted that belief. So first, just recognize what that is, accept that it's there, and no longer choose to access it in that way. But you also have to be willing to do so in a way where you're not afraid to feel and you're not afraid to see what's really living there. And again, these deeper aspects I will always invite that you do it with someone that has been practicing this. I always recommend working with a mentor. Always. It's been life-changing for me, and it's life-changing for those that I work with. But if you want to live a life where you're clear, grounded, you're self-trusting, even when life becomes unpredictable, then you first have to be real with where you are right now and who you are right now. You have to be willing to see those emotional tethers, those invisible cords. And then you begin to understand what that wealth is. Because if you've been outsourcing your wealth, if you've been outsourcing your emotions, like I did with my mom, blaming her, oh, well, you didn't want me, so I resent you for that. I'm always tethered to her, so I'm always going to come back to her. I'm always my focus. I can say I don't care what she does. I can say I don't care what she says. I can say I don't care how she acts. But there is an emotional tether that links me to her from that very early on, those moments of resentment. That's the imprint. And it's always bringing me back to her. So even when I think I don't feel that way, as soon as my nervous system recognizes something in her that I identify as not safe, as not worthy, I actively react. I'm triggered by it because my nervous system is always looking for what's familiar. And that's what's familiar because I haven't reinforced a different state of familiarity. That's where building the muscle and the mechanics of presence and awareness and attentive, responsible awareness comes in. Because if I'm not practicing it, if I'm not being in a state of responsible action, I'm just doing things like I pretty much always have. I might be like implementing some new modalities, but those modalities can't help me if I'm not really willing to actually help myself. And when you start learning how boundaries really work, you see that they act as this like structural architecture that protects your emotional wealth. You don't even have people that run around and announce their boundaries are not actually responsibly implementing boundaries. I see posts that talk about like, I have such strong boundaries that I can recognize narcissists from a mile away. That sentence right there is heavily leaden with unconscious awareness. Labeling somebody else a narcissist is an unawareness of what's actually acting through a mentality of projection. Like there's so many things at work there. And that's what happens. We use words, we put stuff out without knowing where it's really coming from within us. That's a lack of boundaries because boundaries are invisible. They don't need to be, you don't need to announce them. Boundaries look like simple acts of following instructions. Like for those that I work with, if I say, okay, well, we have an assignment due on this day by this time, it's due by that day on that time. Or simple instructions like accepting a calendar invitation. People overlook simple instructions because they're always assuming that there's something else. There's some bigger to do that's hiding behind the invitation. And because we're always operating from that state, not only do we not have boundaries that feel safe and secure, we're always assuming that we got to like hurry up and get ahead of ourselves, right? Like I need to hurry up and read through this because I got to get to something else. I got to hurry up and do this because I got to get to something else. I got to hurry up and respond because I know the answer. There's a sense of urgency that always lives through our nervous system because we're acting through fear. And well, when even just saying, Elliot, that it's not easy to act on a moment, not easy to look at them through their lens, and when someone acts some way to you, that's a belief. I mean, as my mentors say, you're gonna win at whatever game you're playing. So if you believe it's not easy, it's not gonna be easy. If you believe it's easy, it'll be easy. And it really is that easy. But you have to reinforce it, right? You're not looking at them through what they're doing. You're looking at it through, even though I just described a story with how the situation was with me and my mom, my focal point isn't on what she's doing to me or what she has done to me. The focal point is just on acknowledging that it happened and accepting that it happened without placing blame on her for the fact that it happened. I'm placing responsibility on me for the fact that I chose to believe that it happened in a certain way. So nobody does anything to me. Nobody does anything to me. Nobody does anything to you. People act how they act, and you choose to perceive that action in a certain way. So if you're waiting for someone to do something different, you're always going to be living in this like illusion of that specific expectation. Right. But what I'm saying still stands, because if they say something and then obviously, yes, if your original reaction is always to react to through anger, yes. But what I'm saying, if you'll pay attention to what I'm saying here, what I'm saying is that if you daily practice non-reactivity, then nobody will say anything that makes you angry. That's where you end up. That's peace. Because my point is that we begin in a state where we believe that what people say affects us. That's the belief. If somebody says something and they say it a certain way, then it makes me angry. When I say that, I am not taking responsibility for how I feel or how I react. If I want to be in a responsible state instead of a reactive state, then I start practicing that no matter what anybody says, I don't choose to act through anger. I can witness anger showing up. You don't want to suppress the anger. I'm not saying that you don't feel anger. I'm saying that you feel anger, but you don't act or react through it. That's a clear emotional boundary. Because no matter what anyone says, no matter what anyone does, it doesn't affect me. That's a clear emotional boundary. That's the wealth of emotions, because my emotions are contained. They're not projected. When my emotions are contained, I don't have to act like I have it all together just to try to control how I feel. I'm actually aware of how I feel and I'm not reacting from it. Therefore, I'm automatically in control because my nervous system feels safe no matter what. And I don't place the blame on someone else for what they say or what they do anymore. But that begins with the relationship with your parents, my dear. Everyone, whatever relationship you have in your life, whatever connection you have in your life right now, it's built on the foundation of the relationship with your parents. So you have to start there. I don't care who you are. I know, my dear, pay attention to what I'm saying. I literally just spoke into that. So what I would ask you to do right now is to just take a deep breath and to just listen, to pay attention, to give your attention fully to what's being said. Because that is something I just spoke into. So when we go through this, when we go through life and we're living untethered, we're no longer outsourcing our emotional charge, right? Which is what I just said. If we're no longer outsourcing the emotional charge, then we're no longer financing our reality on the memories of someone else being at fault. And guess what? Something really beautiful starts to happen in the body. If you've had a life where you've had inflammation, if you've had nervous system inflammation, if you have nervous system reactivity through inflammation, if you have immune system deficiency, that's all a sign of suppressed and repressed emotions through a lack of emotional integrity. This is, you're living off of past emotions, and your organism is attempting to live from the past in the present, and it's deteriorating. Over time, your brain actually begins to get smaller when you do not address what I am speaking into here. So over time, your brain begins to get smaller, your body begins to deteriorate. That's how you really die. It has nothing to do with, it has nothing really to do with time. And if you give yourself permission to just land in that, it means that you actually have a choice for when you pass on. It doesn't have to happen through something dramatic as disease, as sickness. And honestly, Elliot, I really appreciate your interaction. Even though I extended the invitation to pay attention, it wasn't an attack on you. It was an opportunity. Everything here is going to be extended as an opportunity. So I really appreciate your willingness to communicate and ask questions, because it really does, it helps. It helps. You're asking for clarity. You're asking for clear communication, and I appreciate that. So when you're actually tethered to people, you're tethered through unconscious agreements. So returning back to your parents, you could be tethered to your father. Let's say your father was never really there for you. Say your father was abusive. Then you have an unconscious tether to your father from whatever perceptions you hold around those moments in time. So anytime your father comes into your thoughts, anytime your father comes into a conversation with you, anytime your father comes into physical communion with you, and anytime that happens, your nervous system, it's already reactive through those past emotional events, that just intensifies. And your nervous system, because it's trying to protect you and because it believes your father is a source of some form of, not like, it's non-safe, that's a lack of safety with your dad. Your nervous system is automatically going to always want to push that person away. So the stories are going to push them away. The blame is going to push them away, right? The emotions are always going to be outsourced to him. That person triggers you. That person didn't do something for you. That person did something to you. Therefore, it began the process of them not being there for you. That is a tether. And when you tell the story, you're telling it from a space of needing to be understood in order to feel safe in the event. And so that's because in that moment, let's say your father was emotionally abusive. If you felt like your needs weren't met, the question is, did you know how to voice your needs? And if you did not know how to voice your needs, then you would automatically assume that they weren't met. If you didn't know how to tell your dad or your father that they were saying something that made you feel a certain way because you were afraid of what would happen, your nervous system remembers that, which means that now to this day, you will be afraid to communicate openly and freely with your father because of the belief that something bad or negative will always happen, or the assumption that they're never going to be available anyways. And because of that, sorry, got to get rid of some of these people. And so because of that, you will be consistently acting from that space. And this will, it doesn't just act through your father, it acts through every single relationship that you have. It begins with your father, but it leaks out into every other relationship. And so even, like I say, like even we can see this just in like some of the most minor communication that takes place in here. And it's a beautiful opportunity to see that. The way people speak to other people, the way that they communicate to other people is coming from a deep-seated space of needing to be validated. And so what they're doing is they're jumping in and they're automatically wanting to attack someone else, saying stuff like blah, 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 or making some form of judgment around what's taking place here without actually having an awareness of what that is. And it's not an attack on those people. It's an awareness of it's coming from a deep-seated space of not feeling safe and secure. And so needing to outsource that. And it's like going on the attack and making it seem like they're somehow more powerful and in control. And this is what happens. You know, it's it's just the natural, it's literally the way that our nervous system naturally adapts to communication, to community, because in that very first relationship, we did not feel safe. So when we come into consistent community and communication with others, we're outsourcing anger, aggression, resentment, judgment, projected shame, guilt, all the things. And it can happen in one word. It's all there. And you can sense the deep-seated layers of suppressed and repressed personality that's trying so desperately to be seen. And so if you had an experience like that with your father where it felt unsafe, the key is to remember it was simply an impression. It wasn't a definition, but we make it a definition, right? So then we start over explaining ourselves because we think we're defined by that. We're never safe. We're never safe in our body. We're never healthy. We're never supported. Nobody's really listening to us. So we're consistently following through with this need to be understood in order to feel safe. Like if that person actually hears me, if they actually understand me, then I'm good. If I can just explain myself some more, they'll know what I'm talking about. They'll know what I mean. And I can finally breathe. If I do more, if I'm more active, then I'm useful. As long as I'm busy and I'm doing something, I'm useful and I'm validated as being useful. All of those are behaviors and habits of someone that is not safe in their body. Because rest equals not useful. If I'm resting, I'm not doing something useful. I have to constantly be doing, even when that doing means that I'm on my phone just scrolling. That's not really doing. I don't know about you guys, but I do that. That's not really doing. Like I mentioned early on, I end up like doom scrolling and I'm not even aware that I go into it because my nervous system is so used to bypassing presence. Now, of course, it's not at that degree anymore, but that's definitely a habit I've had to be very conscious on breaking. So that's why we can talk about the things. Welcome, Becca. Welcome, Julie. When we talk about the things that we have in life, like, oh, I've got a great, job, or I've got a great business. I've got, beautiful kids. I've got this great house. I've got plenty of money in the bank. I'm so busy all day long. I've got so much to do, because that person equates their material possessions as usefulness. I'm useful if I have this. I'm useful if I have that. And if that is taken away, their whole identity is formed on what makes them useful. I like how you retracted that and shifted it, Elliot. Beautiful awareness. Screen time is an issue. It doesn't matter what research has done. It has nothing to do with that. Doesn't mean that there aren't some good things about it. I'm speaking about when it's acted from a space of unconsciousness. I like how you redirected that. Beautiful awareness. So if I'm consistently acting from a space that I just spoke into, that begins in the relationship with your father, because those are masculine adaptations. And if you're still operating from the incomplete relationship with your father, you think that just because you're busy all day long, that you're productive, and that makes you useful, and that somehow excuses you from being responsible. True responsibility. Productivity does not equal responsibility, especially if the productivity is coming from a state of unconscious behavior. And those agreements are as such. The agreement is, if I'm tethered through an agreement that's unconscious, it is needing to be understood in order to feel safe. Feeling responsible for other people's emotional states, which means that if I'm responsible for someone else's emotional state, I take that on and I become it. We hear people say this all the time. Oh, I'm sympathetic, or I'm empathetic. Everyone carries empathy. Sympathetic is adapting to what you perceive the emotional state is and then becoming it. I'm sympathetic to your sadness because I'm aware of sadness, right? And I will probably, if I'm not aware of myself, will go deeper into sadness because another person is sad. And then, of course, constantly tiptoeing and acting in a way where you have to walk on eggshells because you're afraid of what someone else is going to do. And so you're constantly trying to be more responsible for how they act and what they do than you are of yourself. And in terms of narcissism, there is no actual narcissist, but there are narcissistic behaviors. But the only way we can even see narcissistic behaviors in another person is if we have become that which we deny. This was a big one for me, and I've shared this a few times, but if you're new here, I was in a very abusive relationship just a few years ago. And I'm talking about somebody that actually tried to kill me. He would choke me out until I would pass out. I would wake up, he would choke me out again. And this is someone that was on trial for murder and was out on bond, you know? So this is not someone that cared about other people's lives. And he did not care about my life, but I didn't care about my life. I was taking drugs. I didn't care about my body. You know, sex was an outlet for me to feel like I was wanted. And it's okay. No need to be sorry. I'm not saying it for pity, you guys. Truly, because he was never the narcissist. There's complete forgiveness here. There's no emotional charge. The intensity, the belief was that that person was at fault for what happened to me. And I lived in fear for so long that this person was going to show up, because he did from prison. He had people like following me. I had to get an order of protection. I mean, it was really intense, you guys, like true terror for a few years there. But what I learned from that, one day it dawned on me, and it was just that, you know what? He's not the narcissist. This is when I was really starting to see things about myself and just how self-absorbed I was. When I was taking drugs, I was self-absorbed. Not because I'm an addict. Taking drugs doesn't make you an addict. You are acting from addictive behaviors, and the drugs are just like the means to an end, right? And when we're consistently following through with that, we don't, you know, irregardless of what people say, when you go out and you start taking drugs or you go into these relationships, none of us are conscious and aware of ourselves. If we were, we would not be in those situations. Even people that are blaming someone else for how they feel right now, there is no difference between that and the situation that I was in. It's just one is a little bit more intense than the other, but they're on the same tether. The tether was that from my childhood, I was blaming my parents for my life. I was blaming them for how I felt. And I ended up in a situation where I could really, really place that blame on someone else. It's his fault. He's doing this to me. He's the narcissist. Look what he's doing to me. Look how bad this is. We become that which we deny. So anything early on in childhood that you have denied, that you expect from someone else, it becomes a part of you. And that's how deeply, like my mom, so much anger, resentment, aggression towards her, that came back to me through that relationship. That anger, that aggression, that resentment, that hate. I met it every single day for 2 years. And I tried to leave. I did. I tried to leave a few times. He followed me. So, but that was an excuse at the time. I felt like I couldn't get away, but the truth was I could if I really wanted to. But when your nervous system is in that state, you're still learning how to make a choice that you can depend on without depending on other people to save you. That's when you start becoming free. And when I finally made that choice and I left, I was like, man, I really do have power. I do have power. Like I can do this. Like I have power. Like he doesn't control me. And as soon as I made that choice, he ended up going to prison within 48 hours. That's how beautiful everything works. When I finally made the choice and I walked away, he ended up getting locked away. And, you know, and from there on, I started realizing I can actually make a choice that returns my power to me. And so I started telling my story. One thing that a lot of people don't want is they don't want people to know their secrets. Like how many of you guys have things you've never told anybody? Or you're only willing to tell certain people because you think that they're somehow protecting your sanctity. There's no such thing as secrets. If there's anything that's living through you, and I just from those of you that I've worked with, I have many clients here right now, many of them. And for those of you that I've worked with privately, we know, right? There's at least one thing that you're holding on to from childhood that you wish you would have said that you never did. A thought that's recurring in your mind like, God, I wish she was never born. I fucking hate my dad. I can't stand the way that she says that. That eats away at you. And then what you have to do is you have to posture yourself to pretend like it's not there. Then you have to act like you're good. Then you have to act like you're never at fault. Then you have to act like you're the nice one. And you're the one that's always useful. You're always showing up to save other people. You're giving them everything. You're doing everything in your life just so you can help other people. And yeah, people do keep their sorrow inside out of fear, because there are those early beliefs that if they express it, something bad will happen. But for those of you that have worked with me, what's beautiful is that nothing bad happens, does it? We had a really, really beautiful, really powerful session just like 2 days ago. And, some of them, the ones that are here, I think all of them are here right now. A few of them got called out on their bullshit, because that's what happens. And I'm not doing that out of judgment. I'm doing it out of love. Because if you're not willing to be seen in your actions that are selfish, you're going to consistently act from them. And you're going to consistently show up and behave as if you're not, when in fact, you're always you're always acting from selfish tendencies. That's the narcissist. The narcissist is selfish. It's not the person out here that's eliciting the abuse. It's the selfish acts of internal, unconscious behaviors. That's the real narcissist. It doesn't mean you're a narcissist. It just means that's the way your behaviors act. You're not an addict. That's just the way the behaviors act. And what I would offer as a reframe is, because this also came to me from a client, and because you're mentioning it here around criticism. One of my clients said that. She was like, I realize how I can't take constructive criticism. In a space like the space that I hold, it's not criticism, it's reflection. And because you guys, you can't look in a mirror with your eyes closed and really, you know what you look like, but what you look like in that moment could be slightly different than what you look like in the next moment. Our image is always slightly changing. That's why some mornings you wake up and you like what you see, and other mornings you wake up and you don't. It all depends on what state you're in, how tethered you are to your beliefs today. Doesn't mean you're never untethered until you actually start doing the inner work for real. But when you're still tethered, you're always, your weather is going to be heavily biased. And we may think we're seeing ourselves, you guys, but until you act in accordance with a community and a communion of mirrors, and you're willing to be seen, even when you think you're not. And that's what happened in that session, right, you guys? That sister, I guess, forgot that I was paying attention to all the subtle actions of her body, even with her eyes closed. I was leading the session, and I was guiding a sister through a somatic practice, and there are other people in the session. And so I'm paying attention to how everyone's body is moving, not just the person I'm guiding. And your subtle actions, how you move your neck, how you hold your shoulders, how your breath is formulating, tells a lot about you. It tells me where you're at internally. And if you're not prepared to be seen, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for the keep up the good work. Thank you. If you're not prepared to be seen, you're always going to be acting as if you're not. You're going to be acting as if you're doing the right thing, but your body, your patterns, your behavior speak so much. Your words, you can think you know what you're saying, you guys. But this whole thing, like giving up on humanity, people don't care unless it benefits them. People do care. And it's not all of humanity. I would invite a reframe. Your experiences might have you dictating that, but it doesn't mean that everyone's that way. There are plenty of people in this space that I know personally that care, that aren't just in it for what benefits them. There are those that are, but a lot of them just, they don't know that that's where they're at. That's the point. So the actual point is everyone has the capacity to care, but many people just have no clue how to act from that state. Right? It's okay. It's all right. It's cool. Let it be seen. It's a place where we get to learn. No need to apologize. It's a beautiful opportunity to learn. So I thank you for saying it, because you're not the only one thinking it. So when you put it out there and you allow it to be seen, everyone that's thinking the same thing gets to learn from it. And that's a beautiful opportunity. And another thing is, we have a tendency to go through life assuming, just because we see a person, just because we hear them saying something, if we haven't recognized, like, if I'm not aware of my patterns, if I'm not really aware of my behaviors, I'm going to assume I know everything there is to know about other people. And it's really easy, so easy. I've said this for the longest time. It's so easy to use generic phrases to assume that you're saying something important. Big words or words of power. I used to speak from that space a lot. Like, I'm accessing Christed consciousness because I understand that inner mastery reveals the true character, right? That true beauty, speaking of that, true internal beauty radiates when you're a master of yourself. What the fuck does that even mean, right? We can say things. We say things without an awareness of what we're actually saying. Now I get it. But I used to spew a lot of stuff when I had no awareness. I could put the words together and I could express it, but I could not tell you what I meant by it. I could tell you what I thought it meant, but not what it really meant, because I hadn't had an experience of what true inner beauty was, because I didn't really love myself. Inner beauty is accepting every part of yourself, every experience, and likewise accepting every person through a lens of God love. And God love loves everyone. It doesn't see bad. It doesn't see war. It doesn't see poverty. It doesn't see mistakes. It doesn't see evil. It just sees humans. And it sees humans learning. That's how I see. I see humans learning. I do speak with boundaries, though. When I speak, everything I speak has a boundary around it. And that invites people to be aware of themselves. So I want to address, I'll address a few things here as we get, I don't want to keep you guys tied up here too long. Unless you're just having a wonderful time, and then I will explore a little bit deeper. But the tethers that we have, the ones that I mentioned, like, are believing love must be earned through overgiving. That's another tether. I need to give. And that will make me valuable. If I give, I did this. I'm big on people pleasing. I used to give. And then at the end of that, I didn't realize it, but at the end of that was an expectation that I must be loved if I'm giving. It was an expectation that at some point love has to come back to me if I'm giving something. And because I didn't have an awareness of that, I was operating from that, which means I'm always trying to please people without an awareness that I'm not really in a state of nurturing myself, which means that I can't really help anyone else. It's just it's a pretense. It's an act. I'm not really helping. I'm just acting as if I am. So the tethers form, as I mentioned, early in life, and they're a part of survival strategies. And because they worked once, you were able to survive the moment. You learned that connection requires adaptation. And because you learned that connection requires adaptation, you've been walking in a way that adapts but doesn't learn. It can be premeditated disappointment depending on where you are. But there is also expectation that's not in premeditated disappointment. I'll get to that. Okay, wonderful, Elliot. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it, my dear. Good night. So when you go through your adulthood, still living from a space that you believe that life requires adaptation, you're adapting to the moment, which means you're pretending. You're taking what you can and surviving it instead of actually living it and learning. So true adulthood asks for something different. That is self-governance. So when I say true adulthood, I mean, like I said, just because you're a certain age, it doesn't make you an adult. Adulthood is self-governance, and this can go in many different directions. Like, obviously, if I'm still believing that a government outside of me controls me, if I'm still acting from the belief in some form of external governance, then someone has some control over me, then I'm not in self-governance. I'm in a projected governance. Now, obviously, we do all have governments at work, but there is a difference in recognizing the government at work and having an opinion or acting from a state that outsources itself emotionally to that governance. And hang on one second. I got to get rid of someone. Okay, there we go. So if I'm living untethered and I'm living in self-governance, then I'm noticing where these emotional contracts are still shaping my behavior. And once I have an awareness of how they're shaping my behavior, then I get to act differently instead of in accordance with how I've always acted. So if I have awareness that I'm still blaming my dad for how I feel, if that memory is still, if I'm still speaking from a space where he is to blame, then I'm still acting in accordance to that tether instead of acting in self-governance where I shift and my behavior changes. So here's a metaphor. We can see this as an energetic bandwidth. This bandwidth is like a Wi-Fi signal, and you're constantly emitting your Wi-Fi signal. And when someone, let's say it's like a hotspot, and when you meet someone that's locked in on your hotspot, like they're transmitting the same signal, they're looking, like their nervous system is looking for that same signal of chaos, and your nervous system is looking for that same signal of chaos. You connect, and then you become tethered to their expectations, their interpretations, their reactions, their enormous amounts of emotional leakage. Now, it doesn't actually mean that we're receiving that from them. It means that we're on the same bandwidth of information. So we're actually just transmitting a specific signal and we're just getting it back, and it's intensified. So if my nervous system is acting from chaos, from emotional chaos from my childhood, then I'm going to come and I'm going to connect with someone that's going to intensify that. Usually this acts in limerence or obsession or intense emotional attraction, like being really intently attracted to someone, and it overrides any sense of awareness around what's really happening. There's just like, it's like a suction. It's like, got to talk to them, got to be around them, got to have them, it's like an intense addiction. And when we have this connection, it's actually coming from our own inner state of addictive behaviors, right? Behaviors that we have not broken free from. And then we just meet someone that's able to mirror that to us and enhances it. So then now we're acting from an even greater state. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people end up gaining an awareness around this and don't do shit about it. And what's really interesting to me is that, well, I want to make this reference. Emotional wealth is a capacity. It's not actually, I don't want to label it as a personality trait, because it doesn't define you, because you can always be in a different emotional capacity. However, when you consistently act from the addiction to needing to feel as if you're wanted, needing to feel as if you're needed, needing to feel happy, needing to feel like these certain specific aspects, then when you don't have that, it's going to feel really overwhelming, because you're only acting from what you want, and at the same time that want is a state of depletion. You're always depleted. You never have enough space to really be in presence with yourself. At least that's what it seems like. And that's because your entire emotional capacity is absorbed in these needs, and the wants of this other person, the wants of attention, the wants of emotional support, and it's just constantly going there, constantly going there. And these contracts are very distracting. That's the point. They're distracting you from what you have determined is unsafe, and that's feeling. And you've determined feeling is unsafe because of those first emotional signatures. That's why it's so important to address those. And you don't just address them, you acknowledge them, but they complete through the freedom of acceptance. Can you just accept the weather of your dad? Can you accept the weather of your mom? Can you just accept who they are without needing to label them as something, without needing them to do something for you, without needing to identify that they have done something to you? When you can let go of that, then you're free. That's what I mean when I say when you don't need another person. You're not dependent on needing to identify with someone in that way. And when people say that it's difficult to let go, that's a bypass. It's not difficult to let go. The belief that what feels difficult is no longer having your addiction, no longer being able to feed your neediness or your want. And what's being asked of you is to let go of that and to fill it with something different, which is self-love, self-acceptance. So instead of feeding this want to be seen by this person, you're asked to, okay, we'll feed it with the want of yourself. It's that easy. But if you're not reinforcing that daily, it's going to feel difficult, because all you're doing is using it as an excuse and saying, I can't do this, because it's so easy to resort to what you think you can't do and what you think you don't have, because that's where you've always been. It doesn't mean it's hard to go the other way. It just means it requires some effort. It requires a little effort on your part. And if you're not willing to give yourself that little bit of effort, you'll always go through life in an expectancy of, you'll always live through overgiving, or expecting that someone else is just going to do it for you. Someone else is going to take care of it for you at some point in time. So how do we shift? How do we become self-regulated? How do we act from self-governance? Well, we have the ability to feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Thank you. Thank you for that, David. This means that I can pause. I feel anger. Okay. I'm going to pause for a moment. Anger's coming up. I'm recognizing anger's coming up. I ask myself why. I might already know why. Maybe somebody said something, and I'm the anger is then a recognition of something. My nervous system is saying, hey, we know this, we recognize this, and this is how we've chosen to feel about whatever it is we're recognizing. And does this mean that I have to remain in anger? No. I can observe it. I can be aware of why it's happening, but I don't have to go into it. The same with feeling like you're like if there's a relationship that it feels like it's hard for you to let go of. Well, if the only thing you do every single day is the same thing that you've always done, then yeah, it's going to feel that way, because you're trying to enter into a new reality from an old behavior, and you can't do that. You have to take, this is why the responsible action governs your nervous system differently. For those of you that work with me, this is why I always say, it's not what I say, it's what you do with what I say. If you actually take it and you apply it and you supply yourself with a reserve of self-governance, then your clarity begins to lock in around your personal needs and your limits. You have a trust in your inner perception. You're not always trying to hide from it. There's a resiliency when things don't go your way, because then you start realizing that, well, it's not necessarily not going my way. It's going the way it's supposed to. And one thing I want to drop in here that's really interesting, and it's based in neuroscience, is that your nervous system is constantly predicting threats based on past experience. So you're always living from the past in the present. And if you do not have an awareness around that, then you will constantly be blaming your past for your present. This is where excuses come in. Excusing why, explaining why, instead of acknowledging, understanding, and having clarity around why. So when someone becomes emotionally resourced, the brain begins updating the predictions. Now, those past scenarios are no longer activating the nervous system in the same way. If I'm no longer blaming my dad for that moment, that memory, then I'm not expecting him to show up in a way that's going to give me an opportunity to blame him further. I'm not looking for the blame. I'm not looking for what's wrong. I'm not looking from the expectancy of what I think is going to happen, because I'm still living from what has happened and I just haven't updated my software. So life stops feeling like something that must constantly be defended against, right? If you're living in this expectation that you have to defend yourself, that you have to explain yourself, if it just seems like and sometimes for some people, I want to say this, people will put on a pretense that it's so difficult for them, that they just don't have time, that they just can't do it, when the entire time they just haven't been willing to. It's never that it was difficult. It was never difficult. They just wanted to do things their way. They just wanted to be self-serving and do things the way that they wanted to. It had nothing to do with the fact that it was difficult. And I can tell you, I have played that card many times in my life. When I didn't want to stop blaming my mom, when I wanted to continue to feed into the anger and the aggression, I knew that I could do things differently. But it was just, it was that, again, it feels good. It felt good to go into the anger, because my nervous system recognized that as normal. That's why it felt good. And it feels good to go into that because those behaviors are normal. And when I start changing my normalcy, then my view begins to change. I stop making excuses and I just start showing up. Like today, I could have I started this, like I said, a little bit later, because I woke up and I had a migraine and some things were happening in my body, but I didn't choose. My choice was not to remain there. My choice was to recognize what was really happening, hold that in my awareness, move through the process of regulating my system and expanding my nervous system and freeing myself from this belief that I just somehow didn't have the capacity to step into it. And I'm not saying it's going to happen like that every time, but the majority of the time now it is happening that way, because I've been training my nervous system not to stay frozen in those beliefs. And therefore my baseline has changed. My baseline is no longer stuck in this consistent habitual lack, the inability to experience a healthier body or a more stable body. My body has actually opened up and it's shifted a lot. My hormones are not inflaming everything like they used to. And that's because my hormones have a different story now, right? The glands process and transmit. And if your glands are not processing and transmitting clearly, then your hormones will intensify the experience. It's an emotional transmission. And it's also it's also a very easy outlet to excuse yourself through and use it as a reason why you can't do something. So when your baseline changes, there's less urgency, there's less proving, there's more discernment and more internal steadiness. But you guys, you don't want to kid yourself, because this is something that's really easy. It happens very, very often. It happened through me for the longest time, is believing that just because some things feel like they're changing, that you've got it all together. Like, oh, I've had a realization. Oh, I've had a somatic experience. Now I know it all. Like, I did that. I did that. And then I realized that that was not true. That I'm going to have many of somatic experiences before I really start to get to things within myself. I believed that I knew something, while simultaneously I wasn't really changing anything. I wasn't taking what I knew and actually supplementing my life differently. I was still doing the same things every single day that I'd been doing, and just hoping that something was going to change. It doesn't work that way. And here's the thing. If this speaks to you, if you feel called out, if it's landing, then pay attention and don't just acknowledge it. Do something about it. Because if that aligned action is not there, then none of it matters. And aligned action is reinforcing something different. And to stop showing up in your daily life in the same way that you always have, and just hoping and expecting that somehow it's going to be different, or people won't notice, right? And most people won't. But if you're in a commitment, like some of you are in here with me, that's going to be noticed. So I do want to say, in terms of boundaries, I used to think boundaries were like rigid, that there was, I for the longest time, my perception on boundaries was that people didn't need them. I felt that your emotional signature was your boundary. And that is true, but I didn't fully understand what I meant by it. I didn't have a masculine guiding me on what that looks like, which I have two now that have been teaching me what it looks like to be in a regulated state of boundaries and rules. Like, right, there are rules, follow the rules. That's it. That's what you do. You follow the rules and you show up on time. You follow the rules and you show up on time. I don't think we realize how much we don't do that. How much we put our own self-development on the back burner. We'll show up to a dinner with our friends on time. We'll even show up early. We'll get on the flight to take a vacation on time, or way early. We'll show up for that. We'll show up in a conversation with the partner or the person that we really, really like. But when it comes to the one true place that is holding support for us, that didn't matter. We won't show up for that. It's not important. Doesn't mean anything. Because we haven't committed ourselves to something different. We aren't choosing to commit ourselves to something that actually shows us what life is, not what we've been pretending life should be. Because those shoulds, that's very stagnant. It's like hope. Should and hope get to go in the same compartment. Oh, I should do this, but here's all the reasons why I won't, or all the reasons why I can't. Well, I'm going to continue to do this and hope it works out for the best. I'm just going to hope that this happens. I'm going to hope for it. Nothing actually changes. So I could know that that's something I should do, that I get to do, but then I never actually do it, because I am obsessed with maintaining this illusion. I'm obsessed with it. I need it. I have to have it. And really, it's not what I need. It's just what I'm not willing to let go of, because I'm selfish. That's really what it's about. I'm selfish. I want what I want, not what I need. That's where needs and wants get completely convoluted, because what you want, I can guarantee you until you know better, is not what you need. And when you actually begin to practice boundaries, like healthy boundaries, actually when somebody asks you to do something in a healthy way, you respond by doing it. Not giving an excuse and not putting it off until tomorrow and not telling all the reasons why you can't. You actually just do it. You just do it. And you see that there was really nothing big. There was no big deal about it. You just do it. And that teaches your nervous system to just simply be responsible. You're just being responsible. You're being responsive instead of reactive. And yes, it's absolutely a part of codependent behavior. There's a dependency. I can only feel this way when I have this, which means when I don't have that and I don't feel that way, then I don't feel good. And then I have to chase it more. That's why we label addicts as addicts. It's not really the drugs that give the high. It's the action. It's the course of action. It's the belief system that is enhancing everything. That's actually the addictiveness comes from. The addictiveness is what activates the addictive behavior. Like the addictive behavior activates the addictiveness, shall I say. So, but there is no true addict and there is no true such thing as a recovering addict. Everyone has addictive behaviors. Everyone. There is just no such thing as an addict. So when you actually start following through, if somebody asks you to do something and you do it, and I mean in a regulated, healthy way, like in a contained way, such as I have a free space that's dedicated specifically to this work. I have a donation-based extension of that space that is even deeper connected and dedicated to this work. And then I have mentorships and private sessions that are dedicated to this work. It's all somatic, pattern recognition, memory matrix resolution, transforming your nervous system to operate in a regulated state. When you actually step into that space and you receive my invitations and you act in accordance responsibly, then you start to learn how to exist without chronic overextension. You begin to understand the clarity of responsibility in relationships. You create space for authenticity rather than performance. Many people believe boundaries damage them or hurt them or somehow take something from them. But in practice, clear boundaries reveal which relationships are built on mutual respect and which are built on emotional dependency. So, you have an opportunity to explore that. I feel like in terms of AI, and I know this has kind of been brought up a few times by different people in their own way. And I know a lot of people turn to AI because I've had it happen in my own community with those that I work with that take a question and drop it into AI and use that as some sort of reference to what they know and understand. AI is a beautiful outlet to bounce yourself off of. I don't feel like I feel, are there realities where that could happen? Yes, but how I understand reality is I am existing in harmony with my reality, and I don't hold a belief that anything can take over anything else. So therefore, I don't have access to that reality. If it's happening for other people out there, that's their responsibility. That's their belief system. But I don't hold a belief that that's going to happen. So I don't foresee that happening. I do feel that like anything, like doom scrolling on your phone, leaning into AI to act as if you know what you're talking about, to act as if you understand. That's just another outlet of addictive behavior. So if people consistently choose to act in an unconscious way and not acknowledge their behaviors, anything could take them over. I've been around since before cell phones. So I've witnessed all the different fear and excitement around what computers were going to do, how the internet was going to destroy the world, how we were going to have doomsday in 2012. I mean, like I've witnessed a lot of different fears around a lot of different things, and it's never actually come to pass in that way. What these things are showing us is how to act responsibly within ourselves. And it can take over for anyone in any moment of their life if they're not aware of why they're actually using it. Can you use everything responsibly? Absolutely. Just like you could eat food responsibly. I believe that there will be versions of reality for people that will experience that because that's where their actions are taking them. Is that going to be for the all? No, because not everyone is following that same course. This is why consciousness is a very beautiful discernment of where a person experiences themselves. Consciousness, the living vibrational essence of everything, determines where you are, and you determine what level of consciousness you access. So if you want to use AI responsibly, then choose to access yourself responsibly, or at least if you want to experience a reality where AI is a responsible communion, a cohort, and that's fully available for anyone and everyone. And remember, I'm going to leave this as a footnote, but I'm also going to say that people that are in that level of awareness don't even need this footnote, but I'm going to leave it here. The assumption or the scenario of AI taking over the world is no different than the wars that we see that take place in the world. Are you directly fighting or a part of that war right now? If not, then the war is an opportunity to see where your attention is going to go. Those that are in the war, those that are in war zones, those are there. It's still, we are exactly where we're supposed to be. And that's because we have, in our own level of spirit, source, soul, we come into this game playing the exact game, the exact parts of the game. All the rules are in lane based on what we choose. Now, I know people say, but I didn't choose that war. I didn't choose to live here. It's karmic reformation. It's not reformation. It's karmic inheritance. So at some point in the line, the suppressed anger, resentment, hate, it's passed down and it boils over into something larger, and we all play a role in that. Every single one of us, even if it's out there, how we choose to internally handle our emotions determines what role we play in that war, just like with AI. The role that you play is based on how attentive you are to your internal weather and your internal warfare. The more responsible you are for yourself, the sooner we begin to experience a more peaceful world. Because when we're constantly needing to defend, when we're constantly blaming other people, when we're judging, when we're projecting, when we're choosing a relationship because we need something, or we feel like we have to, or we're going to miss out on something, when we feel like we have to rescue others, this feeling, this compulsion of being a savior, all of those actions come from an internal state of dysregulation. War is just a world size reference to that. It's just a world size reference to dysregulation. And AI, we could say that that's another form of war, because that's how it could be presented. It doesn't seem as catastrophic at first view, but anything can be used as an outlet for manipulation. War is intended to manipulate fear. It's just making one side more afraid of the other. It's a form of emotional manipulation, which emotional manipulation begins in the very first moment where you perceive an event emotionally without clarity. That's where it begins. And until you resolve that, until you complete that, you'll always be in some way connected vibrationally to chaos. to destruction. Not the type of destruction that's rebuilding, but the type of destruction that's just continually looping in on itself. Yeah, well, yeah. So Mina says, even if it happened in the past, like in our ancestral lineage, we're also responsible for that in a way I feel. Just thinking how the anger that's been suppressed in my dad and also me also flows into the chaos that occurred through my grandfather. Like thinking it goes both directions. Yeah, absolutely. And you come into the line as an inheritance. Your parents are not inherently responsible for you. They choose the level of responsibility in which they apply. Once you come into the line as a conscious intersection, you are responsible. At least you're not inherently responsible, but through willful action, you are. That's free will, where you freely, consciously choose to take responsibility for your emotions instead of unconsciously operating through the inheritance as if it's someone else's fault all the time. That's the karmic chaos. That's the matrix. That's the memory matrix, where it's just being passed down, intercepted, passed down, intercepted, but it never resolves. Eventually, that ends up in wars and all these things we see out here, where it has to go somewhere. If we don't take responsibility for it, it's going to meet someone that will then put it to use. And someone will put it to use in a way that again uses that emotional manipulation in a course of action. So but when you're accepting responsibility, you guys, responsibility is not a heavy burden. It's a state of freedom. It's releasing the tether. Yeah, and you're exactly, your parents are not responsible. And even, let's say they did have the information and they didn't use it, they're still not responsible. Your parents are not inherently responsible for you. It's never about the parents. Even for you as a parent, if you're a parent, I'm a fur baby parent. I'm still a parent because I still act from that archetype. The biggest thing that's been difficult for me is to let go of the need to feel responsible for everything in the way that I have been. Am I responsible for the actual event in the way that it takes place? No. Am I responsible for how I respond to it? Yes. If I react to the event, then I take on this level of responsibility that then blames, shames, guilt, resents, then I become entangled in the event as if I could somehow have controlled the event from happening. That's regret. But if I'm free from that, I'm no longer worried. It's not about the event. It's how am I observing the event? Because if I can observe the event and just be cool with what's happening without needing to control it, needing to change it, but simultaneously recognizing that change is available, that different is available, but I don't have to control that specific event in that way and have that thing happen specifically differently now, then I'm free. Because I know that different is going to show up so long as I'm responding differently. I believe Bashar spoke into this as well. So I'm sure many do. But this is where you do not look to your physical reality as a definitive answer as to who you are or what you're doing. It's how do you respond to it, right? How do you respond to it? And you parent. Yeah, you do. You parent yourself. I call it repatterning or reparenting, because then you're just taking the reins and you're saying, okay, now I'm responsible for how I feel. They're not. They didn't actually do anything to me. They didn't actually treat me badly. But you do have to visit those memories first and foremost, where that little child in you still believes that you did. So you can say all day long that they're not the ones that are responsible. But if you haven't gone through the process of moving through your nervous system and actually reliving the moment and completing the moment through a state of acceptance, your nervous system is still going to play that story out through you in some way, because your nervous system doesn't know the difference between what you know and what, what you know and what actually happened are sending two different frequencies. So just because you know it doesn't mean your nervous system just automatically changes everything. You have to go through the process of the story, and you have to visit it, and you have to face it, you have to feel it, and then you have to be in a state of recognizing that it's safe so that your nervous system can relax and get out of the freeze and fawn and just accept it. Okay, that did happen. Because in moments of emotional impact, we shut down. We purposefully shut down so that we don't have to live the whole situation in memory. So it's the ability to live and feel more like yourself and less like the version of you that you've built around survival. That's the difference. And then, do you think especially Gen Zs are the most affected and depressed because this new era on how to save our future generations? The whole digitalization is plague to society. We are happy in village but moved to metropolis. So yeah, and I understand that. So when it comes to your daughter, and I understand, I mean, I grew up without, like I mentioned, I grew up without technology, like I'm sure many here did. And when we come through this, there's a culture shift and a culture shock that happens when you move, when you shift your environment from a place of seeming peace to a place of seeming chaos. But what I want to offer here is a reframe. So it's an opportunity to let go of trying to reach your daughter and allowing your daughter to come to you. And this was a big one for me to learn. And it's simply because we don't realize how much we are trying to control. And the going from a village to the metropolis, it's also an opportunity for me to offer something here. Just because we move doesn't mean that where we move to is better or worse. It just means something that we have not been willing to see within ourselves is being activated. There was a reason why you moved. And this move is showing you more than maybe you were aware you were going to see. So metropolis, the difference between metropolis and village is the amount of people and the amount of activity. But what is that really? What is that really? The amount of activity is really an internal awareness of how actively in safety and security we are. And it's easy to feel like we're safe when we're in a smaller environment. Like I live in the woods in the middle of nowhere. And for the longest time, I didn't want to go back around people again because I felt that my nervous system was overactive. And I attributed that to being around people. But in truth, and I hope you guys can hear me because it cut off for a second. But in truth, it's not the people and it's not the busyness. It was me not feeling safe in my body. Okay, thank you, Mina. And so when I don't feel safe in my body, then I will be hyper aware of what's happening out here because my nervous system is searching for danger. And so it will feel as if there's too much going on around me and it's bad. It's bad. It's bad. There's too much going on. And then I can label all the things that are going on that feels really uncomfortable that I don't like. In truth, that always begins in here, and your daughter, this generation is going to turn to AI. They're going to listen to AI because as a society, collectively through time, we have not learned to be with our internal weather and our internal stories. So through time, the generations get further and further and further away from presence. The only thing that's going to bring them back is us choosing to be consistently committed to building our own muscle of present awareness, of being attentive to what's happening within us instead of outsourcing that, blaming that, or placing it out there on someone else. So what I'm going to invite for you all is to begin practicing tuning into your internal intuition instead of falling victim to external pressure. Whatever your environmental cues are, give yourself permission to just simply be with it. Listen, pay attention, don't react. If any reaction comes to the surface, pay attention, listen, don't go into it. Just be with it. If frustration, anxiety comes up, it's okay. It's just your nervous system saying, hey, we need to pay attention. Something's here. We need to pay attention. That's not a bad thing. Depression is just a sign of dysregulation. It doesn't mean you are depressed. Anxiety is just a sign of dysregulation. It doesn't mean you have anxiety. It's a moment, because each one of those represents 60 to 90 seconds where emotions were suppressed. That's it. It's a nervous system that's consistently activated to where it becomes exhausted over time. And then it just disassociates. But through consistent, attentive action, regulation begins. Then you start to see that anxiety is it's no different than sadness. It only lasts for 60 to 90 seconds if you give yourself permission to be with it instead of trying to run from it. When you try to run from it, your nervous system holds on to that moment longer because it's saying this is not safe. We need to avoid it. This is not safe, which then just intensifies it. So give yourself permission to move into self-observation rather than self-judgment. And by doing this, you begin to really understand what's taking place. So I'm going to leave you guys with a few questions if you would like to write these down. And these are prompts that I offer for my own clients. And these are really, really good for self-reflection. So if you guys want to get a pen and a piece of paper, I will leave you with some self-reflective questions here. And I'll give everybody a few minutes. And I want to just remind everyone that the goal isn't to change everything immediately. It's just to notice where the energy is flowing. Awareness is the first untethering. When you're aware that anxiety is present, beautiful, be with it. Begins to disentangle you from the need of it, because your nervous system will always bring you back to it because you need to be aware of it. So you will constantly feel like an anxious person because your nervous system is just trying to show you what you need to pay attention to. Pay attention and it will start to diminish. But it requires daily, consistent attentiveness with yourself. Okay? It doesn't just happen through once or twice. Okay? Not even a handful of times. Okay, here are the questions. Where in your life do you feel emotionally tethered right now? Where in your life do you feel emotionally tethered right now? And these are here for you to just simply be with and reflect upon in your own time. And again, where in your life do you feel emotionally tethered right now? That's the first question. The second question, where does your nervous system still feel responsible for holding things together? Again, question number 2, where does your nervous system still feel responsible for holding things together? And just as a side note, you guys, these questions are meant for deep reflection. When you sit down and you actually are present with the questions and you give yourself permission to be with them, the very first response gets to be a gateway into something more. So just allow whatever comes up first to be there, and then to ask what else is there. It's going to always lead you somewhere else. There's so many different extensions to your own response. So the second question again, where does your nervous system still feel responsible for holding things together? Okay, question number 3. What would emotional wealth look like in your daily decisions? What would emotional wealth look like in your daily decisions? And that's our final question. What would emotional wealth look like in your daily decisions? So with that, I just want to remind each of you that living life untethered is not about separating from life, from people, or from responsibilities. It's actually about reclaiming the center of your own experience. So when you're living life untethered, you're not bound by unconscious reactivity. You're free to explore the emotional weather without codependency or reactivity. And when your emotional wealth grows and boundaries become clear, life stops feeling like it's something you have to manage. You're not trying to manage making money. You're not trying to manage feeling better. You're not trying to manage relationships. You're not trying to manage how people think you look and how you're presented. It just instead it it becomes something that you meet from a consistent place of steadiness, this willingness to be in responsible observation. And then you're no longer being pulled in 100 different chords, 100 different directions by 100 different chords. You're not going in 100 different directions. You're not constantly excusing yourself because you just can't focus, because you just can't think, because you just can't feel, because this person said this, or you've got too much to do. You're just standing in your own gravity. You're standing in your own gravity. You become the center of your world again, not blaming everyone and everything else. And what's really interesting, and I'm going to leave this with you guys in closing, is that when the human nervous system, when someone, just one person, stabilizes their internal state, it actually begins to reorganize the emotional dynamic of the people around them. So regulation actually spreads through social environments, the way calm spreads through a room. So when one person untethers themselves, it quietly begins to change the whole relational field. This is why one person in the family line that consciously chooses responsibility changes the dynamic for the entire family line. So it's not about escaping the life that you have now. It's just about becoming a different center within it. You're a different gravitational pull. It's no longer going out, it's coming in. Things come to you easily. You're not trying to manage your life around the way you think you need to in order to try and make it easy. It just happens. It just comes to you, right? I feel like that's honestly what the law of attraction was intended for. So the law of attraction was to show us how easy things get to come to us when we're acting responsibly from our own internal state of gravity. So thank you all for being here. I thank you for receiving. I really and truly appreciate everyone's contribution. I appreciate your time so much. I absolutely love communicating and sharing from experience, from what I've learned, and from the things that I've applied that actually, like, they actually work. It's not just me talking about things. Everything that I make notes on comes from something I've learned, applied, and explored, and it's actually working. And so I make notes of it, and I keep up with it, and I share it. And as always, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here, Becca. Thank you, everyone that's here. So, for anyone that's interested in continuing this work, like I said, I do have a free space. And as always, in the description of the video, there will be information on how you can contact me if you're interested in joining that free space. The donation-based part of that space is something you determine what you want to pay for. It is month by month basis. It is donation, so you determine the price for the month. If you choose to join that part of it, again, you can reach me through the same information. You receive 2 somatic sessions a month with me and the group. You also have weekly assignments and check-in days for reflection and mirroring. So it's very detailed, even though it's donation. And then beyond that, there are set prices for mentorship and one-on-one. And you can also contact me regarding that, and I can share the price with you if you're interested. I have one-on-one sessions, somatic sessions that are about 90 minutes in length, maybe a little bit longer. And then my mentorship is 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Because if you're going to go into mentorship, it's a consistent daily dedication. Okay. Thank you, Mina. Thank you. I love you too. Beautiful. So if you guys are interested, I will have that information available. I will definitely be back. I will have another live coming up. I'm going to be, I'm working in bringing these back into my schedule more frequently, and I enjoy doing them live. I was going to do more pre-recorded, but I just really enjoy, there's a dynamic that happens when we're all here together in the moment exploring that I just really love. And it's so organic. And I'm just really feeling called to continue that. So that's where I'm at right now. So thank you all for being here. I love you so much. If this video has assisted you and served you in any ways, please like, please subscribe, so that other people can discover this, so that other people can join us, and we can build a very beautiful community of consistent communion, steadiness, right? A vibrational frequency of attentive awareness and accountable action. All right. Thank you, guys. I love you so much. Until next time.